Okay. So, sustainable intensity, or how not to burn out, or even how not to burn myself out. So I had a different version of this talk locked in a while back. It was more scripted, polished. Shaped up a lot of ideas. Even ended up writing a whole blog post series. And, it was too much. But I do that. I start with a good idea. I get carried away. Everything ends up becoming a system. And then I end up carrying the thing. And I forget, what was I trying to do in the first place? It sounds like this is resonating with some of you. That's a lot of overthinking and overdoing. So I binned it, the original version of the talk, and I started over. I reminded myself, don't try to be big and clever. Don't perform. And that made me nervous, because I'm used to performing. But I realized the worst thing that could happen is I just give a slick performance. And that's not me. That would mean I'm not really here. Kind of like in this photo, where I'm wearing, that's armor. It looks like tweed, but it's actually armor. And it's the same with the blog posts, frameworks, systems, whatever I create. It's armor made of competence. And it's all performing. So I'm very good at being very good. That's the problem. So instead, I'm just going to be me, nothing extra. And this talks about the same thing, not overdoing it, not burning out. And how we can't tell when it's happening. And I think how organizations are sort of the same. They can't pick up on when they're struggling. When people are stepping in, trying to fix things, burning out. And this talk is also about change, or this thing we call transformation, and how we can do it so it lasts. What happens when people or organizations can't sense what's going on, what that costs, and how we don't get the change we want. So a friend said something to me recently. I've only ever seen transformation succeed at the expense of people, and I've seen the opposite too. Places that feel safe, but nothing really happens. And I think that is true in a lot of places. But maybe it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think there's a middle ground here that we could find. So, I think a lot of you might have seen this XKCD comic. You have this big complicated thing. There's that one little bit there that keeps it all working. No one really knows about it until it breaks. So I think people can be like that too. And then maybe you know someone like that. Or maybe it's someone on your team. Or maybe it's you. It was me. The one that steps in, holds things together, takes on more than they should. And I used to think I was helping, that I cared. It made me feel important, even indispensable. It took me a long time to realize I wasn't helping. I was making things worse, compensating. It wasn't good for me or for the places I was in. So it's a bit of a pattern. I think we've all seen this or even maybe lived it. There's pressure, deadlines, expectations. Things aren't working. When someone notices, maybe they care, they step in, they fix things, they make it all work, they hold it together. And things get delivered. But then it all becomes expected and then relied on. And eventually the person burns out or leaves. And it repeats. Someone else steps in. The thing is, this doesn't fix itself. So nothing gets learned. It all just adapts to expect people stepping in. And the organization doesn't even get to see the gaps anymore. Well, the system learns, we don't need to fix this. Someone will catch it. I think it's a bit like an unhealthy relationship. The organization depends on the person feels needed. And they think, I can fix this. If I just show up more, try harder. But really you can't. All you can do is make yourself the missing piece of the system. Like in that comic, all you can do is hold things together. And no one's going to stop you. And it will get taken for granted. And by then, you're not just quietly propping up the system. You are the system. I think this comes off a bit dystopian if somebody just walked in right this moment. Quietly close the door and back out thinking, okay, where am I? Okay, so that's the risk to the organization and to you. What's it costing you? What happens if you stop carrying the thing? It all falls down. Can you stop carrying it? So a quick story from some work I did not that long ago, and how all this plays out. That's not the first time I've seen this. You've probably seen similar. So I saw someone capable, smart, driven, early on in their career. They could see what was missing, the gaps, how things weren't set up right. They stepped in, no hesitation. They did work that wasn't theirs, plugged gaps. It was all familiar. I've been that person. And so what happened? Things didn't correct themselves. They started to depend on the person. And then that person couldn't be kept. They actually did unpaid work while waiting to hear about that, because they cared. And then we were stuck trying to deliver something that couldn't be finished, because it all relied on what this person knew. And we had a big delivery commitment. So I'm going to come back to this later, because there's another side to it. So we might call this resilience, and we might reward it, or even celebrate it when it doesn't go wrong. Rescuing can feel like resilience, but it isn't. It's compensation. It's filling in for what should already be there. And maybe we should be asking why anyone had to be resilient in the first place. What was going wrong? What are we rewarding or celebrating exactly? So another story, this is from my past, about a decade ago. I was working on a service connected to the prison system. And from the outside, it looked modern, digital, working. But underneath, it was all workarounds held together by gaffer tape. It was a setup so complicated that only a few people really understood it. And we'd get alerts. Things would break, and someone would jump in and fix it. But it only worked because people kept stepping in, like me. So one Sunday, I finished a 5K race and saw a bunch of alerts. So I literally ran across London. I bust into a packed-up office. Everything was in crates. Things were all being moved that weekend. And I had to find a special laptop. And I needed to cut the cable tie on that crate first, which I did with a butter knife, because it was the only thing. Yeah, it was the only thing that was left in the office kitchen. So I was still in my running kit, frantically running around the office. Best guess was that crate was where the special laptop was. Butter knife, sawing away for what felt like 5 minutes. And something critical connected to the prison system was down. But in my head, there was a sort of background music to a thriller. Yeah. So I finally got it open, I found the laptop, and there was no internet. They'd packed all that up as well. Yeah. So I ran across the road to the main building, up 10 floors, and I was able to wire into the network and got everything sort of restarted, and it all came back online, and it was fine. Well, it wasn't really, because this wasn't heroic. It was a broken system pretending to work. And we weren't allowed to talk about how fragile it was. So it just kept growing. The more risk piled up, the organization couldn't see it. Things just kept going. And I was rewarded for my effort. I got a more prominent role where I got to do more heroics. So when we see this happening, when we know something isn't quite right, there are problems, how do we call it out? It's not easy. Plenty of meetings or calls, something isn't right. And you try to figure out, well, how do you say something? Or even if you should, you might think you're the only one that sees it. Well, no one tells you not to say anything, but there'll be a cost. So you think, don't rock the boat, or I won't mention it here. So you sit on it. But if you do speak up, you might get labeled difficult or disruptive, negative, maybe idealistic, or my favorite, perfectionist. I don't think wanting things to work is perfectionism. We can live with imperfection. We shouldn't have to live with dysfunction that can be avoided. These are very different things. So if no one's flagging any of this, if it's not okay to talk about it, it doesn't mean everything's fine. It means that there's a bigger problem. So silence isn't the absence of risk. It tends to be the absence of safety. And I think that's something to sit with for a moment. So I don't think this is just about people or delivery. It's about the conditions or the incentives. It's about what we reward, what we ignore or punish, what we can say, what we can't, and over time, what becomes normal. Well, I've been thinking about this. Why does this happen? And I think it's about Slack. Not as in Slack, the online communication tool. It would be very easy to blame Slack and just go, yes, let's just switch to using, no, you can't switch to using Teams. No, that would just make things worse. Yeah. But Slack is in unused capacity, the space to notice things, the space to ask questions. When that Slack drops, so does sensing, the ability to pick up on signals, to see what's going on. And I don't think it's accidental. A lot of us here like to move fast. We want momentum. Maybe we even need it. We want to get things done quickly. We want to see progress. So we might not like to ask questions like, is this ready? You might not want to raise issues. And over time, slack disappears. When effort starts to look like planned capacity, heroics look like normal delivery. But it just ends up being people stepping in all over the place, propping things up. And we see them burning out or checking out. And we might put that down to personal failure, but it's a signal that something's wrong. But the organization keeps moving because it can't see. It can't even see that it can't see. It's like a person running on fumes. And when you can't see, you adapt by doing more. That's what happens to systems under strain, people or organizations. So that's what happened to me when I burnt out. I was still moving, but I couldn't see anymore. And I was coping by keeping busy. Not always on the go. I didn't feel safe enough to stop. You've probably heard that people are burnt out long before they know it. I think Bilbo Baggins summed it up pretty well here, feeling thin and stretched like butter scraped over too much bread. I think that's a signal right there. It takes a long time for it to catch up. So when I reached breaking point, I didn't know. I disappeared on travels to recover, except I didn't. I was going for 18 months before I stopped. I managed to burn myself out again on my career break. You can't take a career break from your career break. I couldn't rest. I couldn't sense. From the outside, people saw me on adventures, but I wasn't present. So I was on an open-ended trip, but instead of being spontaneous and free, I was sitting in cafes, planning flights, booking things for up to the next 4 weeks ahead, and then flying every week, posting everything, constantly moving, managing, performing. Some of you know me, so if you saw my travels, I hope you enjoyed them. I don't know if I did. I missed most of it. A little next. That's all I could do. Was cope. And that's how organizations that can't see, that can't sense, keep going too. Busy, active meetings, output, performing. And the social media might look healthy, but what's actually happening on the inside, who really knows what's going on? What's driving it? Is this just about slowing down? Maybe. Or maybe it's about being able to notice while moving. Not letting urgency replace sensing. Because once sensing gets lost, the organization can only adapt, can only cope, like I did. I don't think this is about culture or leadership or something wrong with the strategy. It's about how slack and sensing are lost, how dysfunction becomes normal, and urgency becomes the default. So that was me. And I see a lot of the same happening in organizations. But for me, over the last year or so, I've seen things more clearly from both sides. And now I notice when I want to step in, and when it feels like if I don't do something, it's all going to fall apart. And now I watch what happens if I don't step in. And that's restraint. That's something I couldn't do before. That's the gap between the impulse to do something and the act of actually doing it. And so now I can see what happens if I don't do something. I can sit there and think, maybe I don't need to do anything at all. If it breaks, and it relied on any one person to save it, it was broken already. So what I've realized is being able to sit and wait depends on headspace. To see what's happening around you and inside you, to catch yourself. And I think it takes energy to act, but it also takes energy not to react. And it took me a long time to learn that. I used to be driven by urgency. I needed it. To the point where I couldn't listen to my own signals. And learning to do that was less about slowing down and more about creating enough safety and space to notice what was going on. I think that's the same for organizations too. So I can make different decisions now. And going back to the example from earlier about the work that couldn't be finished, the person that had stepped in but couldn't be kept, leaving us stuck. The old me would have stepped in and carried it. But I didn't this time. I held a boundary, and that felt uncomfortable. I think it always does when it's something new you're doing. I said, can we do something smaller here, which I helped shape? but I didn't take responsibility for it because I didn't have the authority. Taking responsibility without authority was a mistake I used to make all the time. So we delivered this thing, and it wasn't ideal, but it didn't need any heroics or rescuing. And I had to hold that boundary repeatedly, including right at the end when I had to say, that's it, this is as good as we can make it, ship it. The pressure to do more was there, but it wasn't realistic. And I've been realizing that doing this, it's like a muscle. The more you do it, the stronger it gets. Heroics feel good, and they can be good in a crisis, but we don't want to be living in a perpetual crisis. So what we want is restraint, containment, offering guidance instead of carrying, checking that responsibility matches authority. I think all this takes time to figure out. What let me do all this differently was protecting my own headspace, letting myself rest, so I could sit with decisions, catch myself, and choose rather than reacting. Being able to notice what was actually urgent, rather than just assuming everything needed to be dealt with right now. And we need enough slack for that. We need to be able to talk about all this. We get to that one step at a time, and it gets easier the more we do it, but building that muscle and tying it to sensing and making boundaries easier is a lot of work. We need it so we can say no when things aren't right. Or maybe not as strong. We can just say, wait, what's the rush? Wait doesn't mean stop. It just means check the conditions. So thinking, what does this look like for an organization? They have boundaries too. Standards. Standards are boundaries. And they're meant to stop bad decisions. They're meant to protect slack. But when sensing disappears, so do standards. So thinking about this in terms of transformation, I don't really think it's about strategies or structures or roadmaps. I think transformation is about whether the organization can hold whatever change is being done, whether it can notice problems early, and if it can actually handle tension without ignoring it or avoiding it or moving on. Can it pause, deal with issues? Does it just keep going and push everything onto people? I think the question we need to ask is transformation just going to add more pressure to something that's already struggling? I think even bigger questions are, does the system have the capacity for change? Are the conditions right? Have we checked them? And most importantly, should we even be doing this change? Are we about to make things worse? So I had a realization while working on all this. I had to ask myself, am I part of the problem? If I keep stepping in, am I helping or just hiding gaps? Am I stopping the organization from seeing them? I used to think, oh, well, this organization, they can't support this change or this thing I'm trying to do. And I never asked, can the organization support what I'm trying to do? Am I leading change or just driving urgency and dysfunction? Am I trying to make it something it can't be? Because I didn't give myself time to stop and check the conditions. And that used to be me. It wasn't sustainable for me, for the people I was working with, or for the organization. So we don't want that. We don't want change efforts just to be collapsing. We don't want people burning out. But we do want things to happen. We want movement. We want energy. We want enough slack to notice and to act. We want to restore sensing. We want to protect slack so we can see the issues, sit with them. That's how change really happens. I don't think we should have to choose between ambition and protecting people. So I think there's a sort of balancing point that we want here, a sustainable intensity. I think we want some guardrails around that. We want to balance ambition with slack, with enough space to notice. Urgency shouldn't be the default. Resilience isn't about heroics, jumping in. We need containment and hard conversations about what's realistic. And responsibility has to match authority. We don't want people carrying things alone that they don't have the authority to determine how it should be done. I think it's okay to want things to get done quickly. I also think some of us are just intense. I mean, I'm pretty intense. I think some of the work we do is intense. Or we think it is. And I think we work in some pretty intense environments, under conditions and incentives that are not under our control. And we can't change a lot of that. But I don't think sustainable intensity means slower. It just means clearer. So how do we get there? How do we check those conditions or even improve them? So first of all, I don't think it's a there. I don't think we get there and say, right, mission accomplished. I think it's something that we keep working at. It's a sort of ongoing, it's a practice. I also think before we start the next big thing, we need to ask some questions. Like, can we raise problems early? Are we overstretched? What are we rewarding? The flip side of that is, what are we punishing? Or just ignoring? What can be said? Who's quietly carrying things? That's not always obvious. But if it's hard to answer these questions, or even talk about them, that's the signal right there. But we need shared language and safety to talk about all this. I think more personally, we need to ask ourselves some questions too, especially if we're the ones that keep stepping in. And these are questions I've been asking myself over the last couple of years or so. And where do I feel the need to step in? Why? What happens if I don't? Can I actually just leave it? Does this need me more than I need it? That can be a bit of a tough one for some of us. And maybe one to gently sit with. What am I avoiding in my own life? So I don't think all of this is one-sided. Organizations that need rescuing will find rescuers. And people that need to feel needed will find things to rescue. You know, how we get back from burnout and dysfunction, it's probably the same way we got there. Small steps and repetition. It all happens bit by bit, either sliding towards things that aren't sustainable or making our way back to things that are. So I think to round off, a little sort of side by side, I'm in a good place now. I've stepped back from a lot of things. I'm no longer moving to cope. All settled. You know, what does that look like? What does good look like for a person and for an organization? For me, I don't rush in to rescue things anymore. I catch myself. I stop. I can sit with discomfort. Some of that discomfort might be guilt or expectation. You know, I need to rush in here, but no, I can sit with that. I rest before I'm broken. You know, listening to my own signals there. And I say wait. I've started checking that responsibility matches authority around the kind of work I take on. And I don't mistake urgency for importance. And for an organization, I think when we see problems raised early and honestly, I think that's a really great sign. Tension's not being punished, so hard conversations don't get avoided. People can actually talk about these things. Standards getting held up. The effort and capacity thing is a really important one, being able to recognize the difference between the two. There's a lot of places that have people running on fumes where effort's masquerading as capacity, and people doing stuff on Sunday afternoons or evenings or just jumping in to fix a thing that's fallen over, like running across London to prop up a prison system. Yeah, you don't want to see people carrying things alone. The responsibility matching authority is here. Organizationally as well, not everything is urgent. We're thinking about who's setting that tempo, where is that coming from? And seeing change that actually sticks, which might be slightly oxymoronic because change, like lasting change is, right, yeah. The bit of change we're trying to do right now is the one that should last, and we'll have a different change later if we want to get into semantics. So with this talk, what I'm really trying to do is just start some conversations personally and, in our workplaces, right? And with something like this comparison, it's just worth thinking about, which side are you better at? Just take it away. I don't think protecting people and delivering change are competing goals. I think if you set up the conditions in a way where people aren't burning out, you get the change you want. So if you're if you're someone that's sociopathic to the point where you think I don't really give a crap about people, I just want my whatever the outcome is, whether it's a return on investment or a big policy incentive that has to be met. If people are burning out, you're also not going to get to that outcome. Like, these are not competing goals. I think we can make all this better. I think as long as we can have the conversations, check in with ourselves, protect slack, and practice sustainable intensity, and get there one step at a time. So, this talk didn't come together fully formed. I'm working it up over a few months and draws on a lot of personal experiences I've had and a lot of mistakes I've made that I think I've learned from. I went through many iterations, but I want to thank some people for supporting along the way. Obviously, Sean and Kat and everyone at Nexar, so it's amazing. Thank you for this opportunity. When I got it, I reached out to Jukesy, Matt Jukes, who gave an amazing talk about the privilege of working in the open this time last year. And he gave me some great grounding tips on don't over-prepare and don't overthink it and all this sort of stuff, which I then decided to do everything he told me not to do. But thanks, Jukesy. Amazing insights from Audrey Fletcher, especially I've sort of paraphrased around the framing at the start, around the two modes, the two sort of failure modes as I see them, change happens but it eats people, or, it's really safe and nothing actually happens at all. So yeah, thank you for that, Audrey. That just gave me a great lens on this. Sean Murray-Hune, Tom Nat, Dominika Novrolowska, sorry, I've just completely mangled your surname, Mark Galgano, Paul Mikulev, Isabel Andrews, and so many others for feedback on early ideas as I was shaping this up, and all those blog posts I wrote to test out things. Rachel, who was on before me, for setting up a little talks workshop and giving me some great ideas on some story beats for this. Richard Pope for letting me do a full read-through at a Lido cafe. My friend Kavita for letting me do a full read-through on the Tube across 3 trains. The rest of the passengers were not listening. My therapist, Susanna, actually, been great as well. Gave her an overview. Yeah. And my friends, Nicola and Krish. Krish is here somewhere. Thank you for being here. And my mum. So thanks, Mum. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Himal. A lot of food for thought there. I suspect many of us may feel rather seen by that. We probably have time for one quick question before we break for lunch. Is there a question in the middle here?
Hello. I loved what you said about the responsibility and authority, and I think often what happens is you feel the need to step in when the people in authority don't take the responsibility. You said that you've been able to protect yourself from going into those situations. I wondered if there was like a question that you ask at maybe like interview stage or something like that at the start to kind of work out if that's happening.
It's a great question. I think there's an element of when you're taking on a new role, whether it's a permanent job or a contract gig, you know, there's only so much you can know about the inside of what you're stepping into. So some of this is the work that we have to do on ourselves to manage our energy and to be able to not react when we're asked to take on something. Some of us may have that reflex to just want to jump in and go, yes, and actually just stop and ask some questions gently about how this work is set up and what you're exactly about to take on. And then, as in the example I had recently, the containment, ask some questions and try to change the nature of what you're just about to say yes to. Not all of us have the luxury, of course, to push back and simply say no, but what we can do is we can help co-create a more sustainable version of that work. And one of the things that I've seen a lot, or I've experienced a lot, but I've seen a lot, is that people in authority may be at a distance from the problems and they may be asking things that are unrealistic. It's up to us to be able to help them shape that into something that is a more realistic deliverable. So it's not necessarily malice, it's not necessarily asking people to do the impossible, it's simply an understanding of, or a lack of understanding of what's actually possible. This all comes back to conversation and creating enough safety so that we can work together across those levels.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Please give it up for Himal.